We have been on a journey with this Elves Falath Evo build. It's been in the capable hands of Johnny, our resident mechanic. We have nearly done it all. In this video, we are going to finish building the bike. There are a couple of issues that I need to iron out. And I will also ride it for the very first time. Alright, so remember that cheeky little issue we had with the front derailleur hanger in our previous video? We couldn't get it low enough, could we? According to the gurus at SRAM and Shimano, we want a gap of 1 to 3 millimeters between the chainring and the front derailleur. Now we had about a 5 millimeter gap, so we weren't miles off, but we weren't exactly on target. Well, the good news is Elves sent a new front derailleur hanger, so off we go, undoing the cable clamping bolt and wiping away a metaphorical tear for Johnny's meticulous clear alignment that I have just undone. I did have a little cry off camera.
Just sad.
Now as we are changing the derailleur height, now comparing the new and the old derailleur hangers side by side, I wasn't exactly filled with confidence. Now the difference is marginal at best. You can see the hanger is slightly deeper, but we're talking millimeters here. But still we push on. We attach a new derailleur hanger with the 2 bolts, mount the derailleur in the lowest spot possible, and as you can see, it is still a tad high. Now after re-indexing all the gears, the chain is swapping from big to small chainring without issue, so I'm pretty sure it would be fine like this. It seems like a couple of millimeters really won't be the end of the world. Plus, Elves have assured me that a new front derailleur hanger will be sent out, and that will enable the front mech to sit lower. We will take it out on the road shortly and give it a test. On to the next task, my friends, which involves some wrenching. Now we are going to install the disc rotors. We have this delightful Shimano Ice Tech rotor. It does look pretty nice, doesn't it? We start by greasing the spline and the lock ring, and then we can slide it onto the spline on the wheel hub. Then we grab the torque wrench, it's a whopper. Now with a steady hand, I tighten the disc rotor to 40 Newton meters. With the rotor installed, we can put our attention on the brake caliper adapter. You may recall from part 1, or was it part 2, of this build series that we are missing, or I basically forgot, an adapter for the rear brake rotor. Now just to clarify, by default, Shimano calipers allow a 160mm front rotor and a 140mm rear rotor. I bought 2 160 rotors thinking they would just fit. They didn't. So after parting with a tenner, we've got the missing adapter in our hands and we're ready to install. We begin by loosening the mounting bolts for the caliper on the bottom of the frame. Now I won't lie, there was a bit of head scratching involved in figuring out which way the adapter goes. But after a bit of tossing and turning, a quick consultation with the Oracle, that is YouTube, I worked out that the adapter is installed with the writing facing down and the arrow facing out away from the bike. We screw the adapter into the caliper first using the bolts provided. Then I added the washers, also provided with the adapter, to the caliper mounting bolts. Now once these bolts are screwed in, we leave them a little loose for now. Why, you ask? Well, it's all in preparation for the brake alignment, which is our next task. It's far easier than it sounds, even with me at the helm.
I feel excited.
First things first, we need to remove the little spacer that's in between the pads, and this has been preventing the pads being pushed in and the pistons coming out. Next we install the wheel and secure it in place with the through axle. It fit nicely, so the adapter must be in the right position. With the brake lever held on tightly in place so the pads are actually pushing against the disc, it's time to tighten the mounting bolts, which we do. Then we give the wheel a final spin and we can see we are good to go. In my quest to install the first bar end cap, I ran into a bit of an unexpected hiccup. The cap wouldn't fit inside the bars. Looks like it's time to bring out the files. Initially I tried to smooth it out with a small file, which to be honest would have been better suited in a nail salon than a bike shed, but hey, I was working with what I've got. To prevent the carbon dust, preserve my lungs and keep the haters at bay, I use some water for dust suppression. Now after a bit of filing, I tried to fit the cap again. It slid in further this time, but then it lodged itself in like a stubborn cork in a wine bottle. It took me a while to get it out, and in the end I actually had to undo the bolt and then use an Allen key as a lever. Realising that my nail file wasn't quite up to the task, I decided to level up and went and bought some larger files. Now after a fair amount of filing, in and out, and a bit of circular motion as well for good measure, a little more filing, a bit more water suppression, and Viola, the bar end cap finally slid in smoothly. Now on to wrapping bars, my nemesis. This is when I needed Johnny, my trusted mechanic, The first step is to overlay the bar tape on the end of the bars. Now I wrapped it a few times around and then installed the bar end. Now I always wrap from the inside out on the drops. This is because it follows the direction of your hand when it naturally puts tension on the tape, so you're essentially pulling it tighter and not undoing it. When you get to the shifter, it's a bit of a guessing game. Now, I watch YouTube videos and heard the term figure of 8 more times than I care to admit. I also tried using the extra bit of tape that comes in the pack, but it just flapped around and made things pretty bulky. And let me tell you, I made a handful of mistakes and had to redo the wrapping around the shifter at least 4 times. After finally taming the shifter, I tackled the tops. These bars have wide tops, so the bar tape was disappearing faster than ice cream on a hot day. The end was in sight though, and things were starting to look pretty good. The next step was to cut the end of the bar tape so it finishes in line with the bars. I added some electrical tape to secure the end, wrapping 3 to 4 times, but I want to make sure no water or sweat can get in there underneath the bar tape. I can then repeat the same process, the same steps on the other side of the bars, basically doing the exact same thing but in reverse. I may or may have not cut the bar tape in the wrong direction at the end, you be the judge, but it's hidden, so we'll keep it under wraps, pun intended.
That was so funny.
Next up on the agenda is bleeding the brakes. First, we need to remove the wheel. The brake pads follow suit as we don't want to get any hydraulic fluid on them. In place of the brake pads, we insert the bleed block. This is crucial to prevent the pistons from moving while we are working. Next, we prepare the bleed cup on the shifter. This is done by carefully removing the bleed screw. I needed this little adapter that I bought that is basically for Shimano shifters, so we'll use that as well. Now the syringe needs to be set up with fluid. Now I'm already running low, so a spillage could be the end of the world for this project basically, so I'm being extra careful. The syringe needs a clear end that can be pushed over the bleed nipple on the caliper's bleed port. Now I attempted to bleed the system by pushing fluid from the bottom up, which means pushing air up as well, basically from the caliper to the shifter. Now I continued the process until there were no more bubbles coming out of the bleed cup. Now despite this, the brakes still felt spongy, so something didn't seem right. Now back to YouTube I went, stumbled upon a fantastic YouTube video. Now instead of pushing the air upwards from the caliper to the shifter, it proposed attaching the bottle or a syringe to the caliper bleed nipple, undoing the bleed port, pulling the lever, and then tightening the bleed port back up. This action would push any trapped air from the bottom of the system, which may be stuck in the caliper. To my delight, it actually worked pretty well. As I performed these steps, air did come out and the lever started to feel better. I think we're looking good. Now onto the rear brake. Now after testing the shifter, it actually felt pretty good. I decided to only burp the brake. This method allows any trapped air to rise and escape through the shifter. I remembered a handy trick that Johnny taught me. I covered the cup with my hand, creating essentially a vacuum. So with your hand over the cup, keep pulling the lever. The lever felt firm and responsive after this procedure, signaling that we are on track and cooking with gas. We will see when we go for a ride shortly.
First impressions, it is brilliant. Honestly, the position's great, geometry feels good for me, it handles well. The 50mm wheels are really good. It's a little bit windy today so I can feel them, but all good overall. The right brake needs some adjustment. I'll have to get Johnny involved with that. It's definitely not as good as the rear. Shifting's really good as well. The front derailleur shifting perfectly fine, so that little gap doesn't really matter, to be honest. I'll change over to the new hanger when that arrives, but overall, no complaints whatsoever. I must admit, being back on a Shimano group set feels good. It is so refined. If you've enjoyed this build series, thank you very much for watching. I've enjoyed the bike being built. I will see you in the next one.